Welcome to Beyond Business Barriers, powered by insights, driven by strategy, and yes, assisted by AI. I'm your host, Roy MacEwen, and today's episode is part of a special series where we sit down with industry leaders to dig into what's working, what's not, and what the future holds. I'm excited to have with me today Christian. I am happy for you to be here today, and why don't you start things off by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, it's a pleasure first off, and thanks for having me, Roy. My name is Christian Martinez. I am currently president. Well, I have a couple of ventures, but I'm currently president of my own small consulting boutique firm, which is called Caleco Consulting Group. I also co-own with my wife a portable storage business, which is a local franchise called Units. So very similar to Pods, if you will.
Perfect. Well, let's dive in. We'll kick things off by hearing about your journey and the shifts you're noticing in your industry. After that, we'll dig into the biggest hurdles you're facing right now, what you're aiming to achieve, and we'll close by looking ahead to see what's on your horizon. Now, let's keep our listeners on the edge of their seats for the next 30 minutes. Are you ready, Christian?
I think so.
Perfect. Well, can you tell us a bit about your role at your company and how it fits into the bigger picture? You touched on your business, your wife's. Let's elaborate a little more, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess first off, my whole background it really is in the corporate world, and I've always been involved and focused in the ad tech space. So I've worked in both traditional media as well as in on the tech side of advertising. But um, currently, as I mentioned, my wife and I own a portable storage business that we've now had for 7.5 years. That was an entrepreneurial venture that I started with her back when I was still working at Meta, where I worked for several years. And the idea was we really wanted to start our own, our own business. Unfortunately, we didn't have a great idea, so we decided to explore franchise opportunities, and that led us to opening that business, which again is called Units Moving and Portable Storage. Our local franchise is basically the South Florida part, so Miami-Dade and Broward County. And we've grown the business pretty significantly over the last 7 years. We have almost 400 containers that we currently rent, and have a 26,000 square foot warehouse here in South Florida. As part of that, my wife runs the day to day. I really focus more on the strategic side, as well as on the marketing and advertising of the business, and utilizing my background in digital advertising really to help drive qualified leads for our business. So that's one component. The other is, as I mentioned, my consulting business, which is really where I spend the majority of my time these days. Especially over the last 2 months after I left my last corporate job in conversational AI. And I have a couple of pillars that I focus on there with the clients that I service. One is helping them understand and optimize from a digital strategy perspective. So really looking at, what are the different areas from a digital perspective that they could have, you know, better touch points with their customers, as well as different revenue streams in terms of monetizing some of those digital touch points. Secondly, one of the areas that I've been focusing on, especially as of late, is helping them with automation around conversational AI. And what I mean by conversational AI specifically is any conversational touch points that they may have, whether that's telephony, such as or chat-based platforms, which could include anything having to do with text, SMS, WhatsApp, for example, or email, and basically helping them to automate those touch points. The second area around that is with marketing and advertising, them helping them to walk customers down the marketing funnel. So that could happen on their website, it could happen on text platforms, it could happen on email, but basically utilizing AI agents to help move a customer in an automated fashion down the funnel all the way down to purchase. And the third component of the AI piece is helping them automate internal touch points with employees, for example. So internal enterprise solutions where they might be able to utilize AI agents to help provide their employees with resources as opposed to having to have their HRBPs, handle all of that communication flow. And then I've also worked with some of my customers from a retail media perspective. I had a retail media platform, an advertising platform that helped to optimize um, advertisers who were advertising or selling products on Amazon through Amazon ads. So I helped them understand and navigate kind of that landscape as well.
Well, based on that, let's try to break it down for the listeners. What
Sure.
does a typical day look like for you, if such a thing exists? What's a typical day for you, other than taking some time for your busy day to do this podcast with me?
Yeah. Well, I guess I can't say that I have a typical day because every day tends to look pretty differently. I guess that's one of the things that I've learned as opposed to being in the corporate world where things are much more structured. When you are working for yourself, things tend to be a lot less structured. And in my case, they really tend to fall on what the needs and requirements of my customers might be that day, my clients. So, usually I start every day off very early in the morning before I take my kids to school and go to the gym and basically start understanding what some of the most important current events from a business perspective are. So, uh, usually I start my day by reading and watching CNBC just to understand where the market's moving, what some of the most interesting business headlines are, because that ultimately can impact some of the things that I do with my clients from a consulting perspective. Then I do make sure that after I take my kids to school, I go to the gym every morning, and then I come back, sit at the computer, and start reviewing my emails, start responding to any client emails that were sent in terms of requests, and then usually I have some calls set up on a daily basis with my customers to review metrics of any optimizations that we made with any of their digital strategies or campaigns that they might have running across different platforms, just to see how those KPIs are measuring on a daily basis. I do tend to attend a lot of conferences as well. So for the last 3 days, for example, I was attending a conference here in Miami called Possible, which is a big conference for anybody that's in the marketing, advertising, or tech space. So it's a good opportunity to network and identify new clients potentially. And then I always spend a couple of hours, usually in the afternoon, on my portable storage business, where I look at what some of our competitors are doing, assess their pricing, and then help my wife make some decisions in terms of how we either adjust pricing or adjust our own advertising campaigns for that business.
Well, let's shift gears a bit now. What major changes? Because I noticed you mentioned making changes here and there as you go throughout the day, because you have to, see what's going on and what changes. Well, you have to react to those changes. But what changes or trends are you seeing in your industry right now?
Um, Again, it depends by which one of those businesses or components of those businesses we're talking about. But certainly, from an AI perspective or conversational AI perspective, that's a landscape that changes on a daily basis. There's new technology that gets implemented daily. Um, but in terms of what we do, again, I focus really on the conversational AI component and helping to automate some of those touch points. So we really look to see on a daily basis some of the recommendations that I've made for my clients on different platforms that I bring to the table for them to understand how that automation is working. Do those AI agents, are they doing what they're supposed to do? Are they responding to customer requests in the fashion that the customer would, that my client would like for those AI agents to respond to their end customers? From a digital strategy perspective, the most important KPI for any customer is ROI or ROAS, return on ad spend. So when we look at some of the things that I've recommended for them to do in terms of either advertising from a lead generation perspective or from a brand perspective, just understanding how those campaigns are ultimately tracking back in terms of the return on investment on their ad spend. And I think that's kind of um, an evergreen metric, if you will, from an advertising perspective. Anybody who spends money on advertising, any brand or client that spends money on advertising, wants to understand for each dollar that they spend, how much are they making back in terms of sales. So those are really the things that we look at, and those are really the most salient trends, if you will, because they apply across the board when you're looking at things through a marketing lens.
Oh, have you had to, like, the impacting your growth strategy, have you had to change your business model as of late? Like, has that created any issues that say, "Oh, okay, I gotta go from this to that," but, basically your business model, do you have to change it very much?
Yeah, I mean, I do tweak it from time to time. Again, I've worked in the corporate world a lot, so I've had different windows throughout my career where I focused more on consulting, and obviously, over the years, the whole consulting model, at least from my perspective, it has changed to a certain degree. In terms of with different clients, sometimes it's more retainer based, or sometimes it's more based off performance. So that really does that is, I guess, the one variable that changes from time to time, depending on the economic situation, and the type of customer, the type of industry that you're talking about and dealing with. So yeah, I think in terms of how, from a business model perspective, in terms of my monetization model, there are tweaks from time to time in terms of the specific type of client and the category that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna change that from saying change to tweaking because
Yeah.
it's always continuing. You're always looking at it. You're always waiting for variables to pop up, and
Yep.
it's better to be uh, proactive than reactive too.
Yep.
That's the big thing too.
And ultimately, just I'm sorry to just add one other thing on that. At least from my perspective, and I would assume from most people that work in the consulting space, at the end of the day, you want your clients to be successful, and you have to be able to adjust your own business model to make sure that you're driving success from a financial perspective for them. So you have to be somewhat nimble and willing to adapt your business model
Oh,
depending on the
absolutely.
needs.
Yeah. So zooming in a bit, what's working well in your business right now? What do you think that just pops right out to you and says this is working well? We won't jinx it, but what's working well for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, anything having to do with AI is something that all clients are interested in, and figuring out ways to automate processes, especially back end processes, and in my case, communication touch points with clients is something that they're all interested in, and something that ultimately works really well because the technology is there now, right? So, I am confident when I tell a customer that they can automate a good portion of their customer service utilizing an AI agent, that they are going to be able to bring down their overhead, um, ultimately free up their existing human capital to focus on more important things, and kind of step away from the more mundane things that an AI agent can automate for them. So those components have been working very, very well, but we've instituted that with clients. They've seen success again, both in terms of making more top line revenue as well as bringing down their cost structure. So that's an area that I think is will continue to do well, and not just on the conversational front. That's what I focus on, but
Yeah.
obviously AI is something that is completely pervasive at this point and helping to automate many different processes. The second thing that I really do see a lot of customers seeing a lot of success with is retail media. Retail media, it's obviously a component of advertising, but it's more specific to advertising on platforms,
Right.
the retail focus. So obviously Amazon was the one that started this, but Walmart Connect, Costco, Best Buy, Samsung, all these companies have a retail media component now that basically gives new opportunities to advertisers, and those platforms bring a wealth of first party data and marry that first party data with advertising, which ultimately helps drive um, more efficient return on ad spend, because it's ultimately driving sales. They know, Amazon knows that they can target customers who are in the market for shaving cream, right? At any given point, they have that first party data. So being able to marry that data from an advertising perspective is something that I've seen be very successful for different advertisers that I've worked with.
Oh, well, now on the flip side of that, what's been frustrating through that?
Um, I guess frustrating is that no two campaigns ever work the same, right? So
No, that'd be too
uh,
convenient. That's
yeah, unfortunately, that's the same. That's applicable for everything, even on the automation side of AI. Something that works for one client in a specific category with a specific product or service doesn't necessarily work the same way for another client or advertiser with a different product or service. And it's always it's uh, advertising is somewhat scientific, but in this case, it's not. It's more of an art. Sometimes things just don't work the way you expect them to, and that can be frustrating, especially for a small business like myself, a consultant where you're confident that the approach you took and worked so well with one client will work for another, and that's not necessarily the case. And that's why you have to be very transparent with clients from the get-go and explaining the fact that the best approach is always a test and see approach. Um, and as you test and see what those results are, be willing to optimize in real time, because if there is one thing that's guaranteed is that it's not going to work the same for every advertiser, and you have to be willing to optimize until you find the right solution for that customer specific situation.
that's that's the transparency and honesty. I mean, goes so far. And that's what retains clients too. And I found myself even speaking with people. If honesty is out there, then they don't question as much. I mean, and then the trust, well, trust is built over time. But if you show transparency with honesty, and I think that's what you're elaborating to here, that it goes so far in a business and the rapport that you build with your client.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I've grounded myself in three core pillars throughout my entire professional career, and that's transparency, number one, just being completely transparent with customers about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what my objectives are, etc. The second one is always humility. I've always tried to ground myself and not never telling any customer or anyone that I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread and I'm going to guarantee that we're going to revolutionize their business. But I come in with a much more humble approach, telling them I've done some things that have worked. Hopefully they'll work for you, and but I need you to be willing to optimize in real time until we find the right solution for you. And the third pillar is just operational excellence, making sure that with what we have control of, or what I have control of, that we are executing at the highest level, to make sure that we can drive the best results for them wherever possible.
Now let's check into you mentioned on KPIs. For listeners, I mean, most people tuning into this should be very familiar with KPIs, key performance indicators. I know there's lots of acronyms out there, but this one is very easily focused on. So, which metrics right now are getting the most attention on your dashboard right now?
Yeah, I mean, the most important one for any of my clients is ultimately how much incremental revenue can I drive, right? Like that's the most important one for, and it's the most simplistic one. You run a business, you want to know how you make more money. So just driving incremental revenue is now, and I think will always be the most important KPI, if you will, for any customer. But that obviously they get more nuanced. So if you're running advertising campaigns, like I said, return on ad spend is something that's always going to be, probably the most important KPI after total revenue, incremental revenue generated, because that just helps them understand the relation to if I put $1 down, how many dollars back am I making in terms of sales? So that helps to understand the efficiency of what you're doing from an advertising perspective. So that's one that I always look at in terms of any of the recommendations that I make for customers in terms of their marketing or advertising campaigns. Um, and then from uh, an AI perspective with the conversational AI recommendations that I make, there it's similar. I mean, there we're looking at how are we improving the bottom line and saving them money in terms of cost. But ultimately, especially when we're using it from a marketing or advertising perspective, Similarly, they want to know, well, how much more money are we making? So that kind of ties back to a return on ad spend or ROI in terms of what they've invested into this and how much incremental dollars are they making based off of that. So those are really the KPIs that I focus on the most, and I think my customers do as well.
That's fair. I mean, I would appreciate that. So let's look ahead a little bit. Where would you love to see your business in the next 6 to 12 months from now?
Um, well, I got to break it up between the two businesses. So
Yeah,
on my
exactly.
on my portable storage container business, I'd love to see us continue growing. We're at about 400 containers now. A year from now, hopefully, we'll be closer to having 450, 460 containers uh, that we'll have available. In that business, just the more inventory you have, the more revenue you make, right? The more containers you can rent, the more
Yes.
raw revenue you make. So there's pretty obvious.
What about the storage containers? Like they're portable, so they go from
Yeah.
site to site, but you have one major store. How far can you expand before you have to expand your storage facility?
Yeah, so we probably have a room in our current storage facility to take on probably about 100 more containers before we would have to expand. We have a good amount of space still available that we aren't maximizing yet, that we could, if push comes to shove, we could reconfigure things to probably fit in about another 100 containers. Um, but yes, that's also a big that's a very important component of that business is the overhead, the cost of real estate, especially in the market that I'm in Miami. It's industrial real estate is very expensive, so that's something that we're always very cognizant of. In fact, our current lease is up in a year, so we're already looking at where we might have to go, given that our next lease will probably be significantly more expensive. So we have to balance out the increase in cost of real estate versus our desires to continue growing inventory and the need that space the need for space that will drive. So we yeah, that's a constant that's a constant thing that's on the top of our mind is how do we balance cost versus space that we may need to expand our business.
Now, on the other aspect of your business, where do you see that in 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so on my consulting business, right now I'm aggressively trying to grow it and expand into different verticals with new clients. So 6 to 12 months, I'd love to onboard, another, let's say 5 to 6 good size clients in both the conversational AI space as well as on the digital strategy side. And ideally, maybe hire uh, 2 people to help me kind of scale the business from an account management perspective, as well as potentially a salesperson to help me identify and bring on new clients as well. So in an ideal world, in 12 months, that's what it would look like. Another 5 to 6 good sized clients and maybe another 2 employees that could help me scale the business.
Okay, now here's where we go from science fiction to reality here. If you can wave a magic wand, Christian,
Yeah.
and fix one major issue today, what would it be?
Specific to my business or just from a broader perspective?
Well, your business. I mean, that's what you know.
Oh. Well, if I know the answer to that, at least in one of my businesses, we just touched upon that with the portable storage business. If I could wave a magic wand right now, the biggest, I guess, hurdle or threat to that business is real estate. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would find a plot of land, a couple of acres that were reasonable in price, which doesn't exist here in Miami at this point, zoned industrially, and I'd build a warehouse at a reasonable cost, and I'd control my destiny from a real estate perspective. So again, that's a big magic wand because the
yeah.
two things that I just mentioned right now are very difficult to come by because construction costs are through the roof, and obviously interest rates are high. and the cost of land, if you can even find it, that's zoned industrially is astronomical. So that's an easy answer right there.
Yeah, I kind of figured that's where you were going. That's why I was kind of saying, how can I make this sound more exciting?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Now,
for your business now, the other proportion,
yeah.
what's the magic there? What would you like to see?
Oh, I mean, there for the consulting business, it would, I guess, really the magic wand wouldn't be much different than what I said before. I'd love to have a much larger organization where, I'd have 5 to 10 consultants and then a supporting cast of account managers and sellers, and we'd be generating several millions of dollars a year in revenue. That would be a great magic wand to wave.
Me
So
too. I'd like that one too.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great. The reality is obviously a bit different, and you gotta hustle a lot to get to that point. But in an ideal world, that's where we would be at some point.
Well, I find your beliefs are very realistic, and
Yeah.
I don't think that you would be creating and saying stuff that people would just want to hear, and that's what I respect and appreciate about your personality. That's great.
Thank
Um, so let's just say it's been an awesome conversation, Christian. Thanks again for being so candid, thoughtful, honest. Once we wrap this series up, Beyond Business Barriers, I'll be putting together a summary of key insights from across all our guests, and I'll definitely send one your way.
that'd be great.
And um, we'll get this all edited up, and we'll get it over to you